I never saw it coming. I had built my life, my family, on the assumption that the foundation was unbreakable, that the love and respect my wife, Catherine, and I had shared for over 18 years was solid. But one day, I woke up to the reality that everything I thought was stable was actually teetering on the edge of collapse. Catherine had been hiding something, and by the time I realized it, the betrayal was already in motion. My name is Victor Price, and for the last 2 decades, I had lived what I thought was a perfect life. A loving wife, a daughter who was growing into a brilliant young woman, a home we'd built together in the suburbs. It was everything I ever wanted. My career as an attorney was demanding, yes, but I had always made time for my family, or so I thought. As a man approaching 50, I had dedicated my life to both my job and my family, thinking that balance existed simply because I tried. But that's where I went wrong. At first, the changes were subtle. So subtle, in fact, that I might have dismissed them if I wasn't looking so closely. It started with Catherine spending more time in her art studio, retreating to her creative space for hours on end. I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, she had been working on her biggest show yet. I figured that her art was consuming her. But over time, I noticed that she became more distant at dinner, more preoccupied, and less engaged with Sophie, our 14-year-old daughter. Catherine was the warm, attentive mother, the one who took an active interest in Sophie's life, her school projects, and her friends. But now, Sophie was left to her own devices more often than not. And when Catherine did join us at the dinner table, the conversations felt forced, awkward. It was like there was a wall between us, and no matter how many times I tried to knock it down with jokes or questions about her day, she would barely engage. Then came the phone. Catherine, who had always left her phone on the coffee table or on the kitchen counter without care, started keeping it with her at all times. I didn't think it was a big deal at first. Who doesn't keep their phone close by these days? But then, the phone calls started. She'd excuse herself from the room, always saying it was a work thing or a quick call with a friend. Each time, I'd hear a click of her phone locking, a sound that seemed to echo in the silence between us. I shrugged it off for weeks. Maybe she was just stressed. Maybe it was the gallery show that was causing her to be distracted. But then there was the night. I noticed something strange. Her phone slipped from her hand while we were watching TV. A simple accident. She fumbled to pick it up, but as she did, I saw a text message from an unknown number. It was a string of flirtatious remarks, and while I couldn't see the sender's name, the tone was unmistakable. "Can't wait to see you again tonight," it read. I felt a coldness creep over me, but I didn't say anything. I thought about confronting her, but I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was innocent. The next few days, I tried to act normal. But the more I observed her, the more I felt like something was off. She was acting different, and it wasn't just her phone or her studio time. The small things, the way she didn't smile when I came home, the way she avoided talking about our future, the way she pulled away when I tried to hold her hand, told me something had shifted. But still, I refused to believe it. I told myself that I was overreacting, that maybe I had been too consumed with my own work to notice the changes in her. Maybe I was the one who had been distant, not her. I kept telling myself that we were fine, that it was all in my head. Then Sophie asked me a question one evening that I couldn't ignore. As we were sitting together at dinner, Sophie sweet, perceptive Sophie looked up at me and said, "Dad, why does Mom seem so sad? Why isn't she talking to me anymore?" Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. The realization hit me like a freight train. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just in my head. Catherine had been pulling away from Sophie, too. And the distance wasn't about art or stress or anything else I had imagined. It was something deeper, something that had been festering for months. The illusion of stability I had so carefully constructed began to crack in front of me. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was wrong, and it was bigger than I could have ever imagined. Little did I know, that night would be the start of a painful journey into the depths of betrayal, one that would force me to confront the harsh reality of my marriage and my own role in its unraveling. The days that followed Sophie's innocent but pointed questions stayed with me. It echoed in my mind like a drumbeat I couldn't ignore. Was I truly that blind? Was everything I thought I knew about my marriage and family really a facade? I could no longer shrug off the small, nagging details that had piled up over the past few months. Details that now screamed something wasn't right. I decided to pay closer attention to Catherine's behavior, although part of me wished I could go back to the easy comfort of ignorance. Every time I walked into the house after work, Catherine would be in the kitchen, her back to me as she prepared dinner or tidied up. But there was no warmth in the way she greeted me. "Hey, how was your day?" she would ask. But her tone was flat, robotic almost, as if she were going through the motions without truly caring. I couldn't remember the last time I had heard her laugh, the kind of laugh that made our house feel like a home, rather than a place we just coexisted in. It wasn't just the way she spoke or acted. Her body language had changed too. Gone were the days when she would run to the door to greet me with a smile, arms open wide. Now, she barely even looked up when I entered the room, her gaze fixed on something else: her phone, the TV, or the magazine she was flipping through. I had heard about the 7-year itch in marriage, and as I approached our 18th anniversary, I began to wonder if it was more than just a theory. Perhaps the distance wasn't because of a natural shift in our relationship, but because something else was happening, a secret I wasn't privy to. Then came the phone. It had become an object of curiosity for me. Catherine was always on it, and it never left her side. I'd never been the type to snoop, but the subtle shifts in her behavior made it hard not to feel like I was being shut out. It wasn't just that she took it with her everywhere: into the bathroom, into the bedroom, and even while sitting at the dinner table. It was the fact that she started locking it, a behavior so unlike her that it made me stop and ask myself, why? One evening, I couldn't take it any longer. I decided to confront her. "Catherine, what's going on? You've been so distant lately. You barely talk to me, and when you do, you seem, distracted," I said, sitting across from her on the couch. She looked up from her phone, startled, as if I'd caught her doing something she wasn't ready for me to see. Her face softened, but only for a moment. She exhaled slowly and responded, "It's just work. You know how busy things are with the gallery show coming up. I'm just overwhelmed." I nodded, trying to convince myself that this was just a phase. Maybe I'd been too caught up in my work to notice how stressed she had been, but something about her response didn't sit right with me. The way she shrugged it off, the lack of urgency in her voice, made it feel like a rehearsed answer. It didn't add up. I pressed further. "Is there something you want to tell me? I feel like we've been slipping away from each other, and I don't know why. Is there anything I've done?" She gave me a weak smile. "No, Victor, nothing's wrong. I'm just tired, that's all. I'm fine." But she didn't meet my eyes. Her gaze lingered on her phone again, and it was like a signal that the conversation was over. That night, I tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't rest. The doubts and suspicions I had kept pushing away now overwhelmed me. Catherine wasn't being honest. She had changed, and I couldn't ignore the fact that I wasn't the cause of that change. I had been trying to be a good husband, a good father, but what had I missed? What had I been blind to? It wasn't until the next few days that the truth began to solidify in my mind. I walked into the kitchen one afternoon and found Catherine hurriedly putting her phone down on the counter when she saw me. It wasn't subtle. I hadn't even asked about her phone, but her reaction told me everything I needed to know. Something was being hidden. It was in that moment that I realized this wasn't just about a change in our relationship or a natural drift. This was something far more serious, something deeper. I didn't know what it was yet, but I was about to find out. And the truth was going to shatter everything I thought I knew about the woman I loved. The pieces were beginning to fall into place, and I could feel my world tipping over, just out of my reach. But I had to know the truth. I couldn't live in this fog any longer. I needed to find out what Catherine was hiding, even if it meant confronting the painful reality that our life together wasn't what I thought it was. The days following my last conversation with Catherine were an emotional roller coaster. I had spent so much time ignoring the signs, convincing myself that this was just a rough patch. But now, with the nagging feeling that something was deeply wrong, I could no longer sit idly by. Catherine's distance, her secretive behavior, and the strange way she avoided engaging with me had become impossible to dismiss. I needed to know the truth, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it, but I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine. It all came to a head one afternoon. I had been working late at the office when I received a text from Catherine saying she was going to meet a friend for coffee. The text was casual, yet there was something about it that set off alarm bells in my head. She didn't mention the friend's name, and it seemed unlike her not to have told me who it was. I had been trying to ignore the growing tension, but now my curiosity got the best of me. I decided to follow her. I parked a few blocks away from the cafe where she said she'd be. My heart was racing, and a heavy weight settled in my chest. I tried to remind myself that I was just being paranoid, that maybe she simply needed space or some time with a friend. But deep down, I knew I wasn't just being cautious. I was scared. When I arrived, I saw her standing outside the cafe, pacing and talking on the phone. I froze for a moment, watching her from a distance. My stomach dropped when I heard her voice. It wasn't light or cheerful, it was serious, low, almost intimate. She was speaking to someone in a way that I hadn't heard her speak to me in years. The words were muffled, but I could make out a few phrases. "I'll see you soon," and "can't wait to be with you." My breath caught in my throat. I stayed hidden in my car, unable to move, unable to tear my eyes away from her. This wasn't just a casual conversation. She wasn't talking to a friend. She was talking to someone else. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't hear everything, but the tone of the conversation, the urgency in her voice, it was enough to make my heart sink. I watched as she ended the call and slipped her phone back into her purse. She seemed distracted, her eyes darting around, as if she knew someone might be watching. But she didn't see me. I stayed where I was, my mind racing with the implications of what I had just overheard. When she finally went inside the cafe, I sat there for what felt like an eternity, trying to process what I had just witnessed. My thoughts were spinning. I knew I had to confront her, but how could I even begin to ask about what I had just heard? The image of her talking so intimately with another man haunted me. It wasn't just that she was keeping secrets from Mate, was that she had crossed a line, and I hadn't seen it coming. That evening, when she returned home, I could barely look at her. I wasn't sure what I was feeling anymore: anger, betrayal, confusion. It all churned inside me. I decided to confront her, to demand the truth. But when she walked through the door, she was her usual, self-distracted, but seemingly unaware that I knew what had been happening. "Hey, how was the coffee date?" I asked, my voice carefully controlled. Her eyes flickered with a brief flash of surprise before she answered. "It was fine," she said almost too quickly. "Just catching up with an old friend." I wasn't going to let her brush me off this time. "An old friend?" I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. "Who exactly?" She hesitated for a moment, then let out a sigh. "Victor, please. It was just a coffee with Ryan. He's an artist I met at the gallery last month. We've been talking about art stuff. There's nothing to be worried about." But I wasn't buying it. The weight of what I had overheard hung between us like a thick fog. "Is that all?" I pressed. "Because I overheard your phone call earlier, and it didn't sound like art stuff." Catherine's face paled, and for the first time in weeks, she actually looked at me, really looked at me. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of guilt and fear. She took a deep breath before speaking, the words coming out in a rush. "Victor, I didn't know how to tell you. I've been seeing Ryan for the past 6 months. It's been more than just talking about art. I'm sorry." The apology felt empty, and the words felt like they were suffocating me. I had never expected this. I had never imagined that the woman I had spent half my life with, who had been my partner, the mother of my child, could betray me like this. It didn't matter how many times she apologized or how much she said she didn't want to hurt me. The damage had already been done. I stood there, numb, as the reality of her confession sank in. Catherine wasn't the woman I thought she was anymore. The woman who had stood by me through thick and thin, the one who had once made me feel invincible, was gone. She was someone else, now someone I didn't know. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just a bump in the road. This wasn't something we could fix. The trust had been shattered beyond repair. The truth had come out, and there was no going back. The life I had worked so hard to build with Catherine had been built on a lie, and it would never be the same again. The evening after Catherine's confession was a blur. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think. I sat on the edge of our bed, replaying every conversation, every subtle shift in behavior, every awkward silence. I had known something was wrong, but hearing her admit to an affair with Ryan hit me harder than I had ever imagined. The woman I had spent the last 18 years of my life with, the one who had been my partner, my confidant, the mother of my child, she had betrayed me in the worst way possible. And I still couldn't wrap my mind around it. The house felt emptier now, despite the fact that Catherine was still here. The weight of her confession hung in the air, suffocating me. Sophie had already gone to bed, unaware of the storm that had just torn through our family. I didn't know how to process the fact that this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was the truth. And it was ugly. Catherine had stepped out of our marriage for months, and I had been oblivious, caught up in my own world, thinking everything was fine. The guilt began to creep in. But then, in the pit of my stomach, the anger began to take hold. How could she do this to me? How could she lie to my face for so long? I couldn't look at her. I couldn't stand the sight of her sitting there, looking so small and remorseful. She kept apologizing, but it didn't matter. The words seemed hollow, like they were just something she had memorized and thrown out in hopes of undoing the damage. "I'm sorry," she kept repeating. "Victor, I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened." Her words made me sick. It wasn't about her intentions anymore. It wasn't about whether it had just happened. She had made a conscious choice to lie, to betray me, and to keep me in the dark while she carried on with someone else. Every excuse she gave sounded like an attempt to alleviate her own guilt, to shift the blame onto anything but her own actions. But despite my anger, I couldn't escape the haunting realization that Catherine wasn't just acting out of malice. She was broken too. As she sat there, her face flushed with shame and her eyes filled with tears, I saw a woman who was struggling with her own inner turmoil. She wasn't the same person I had married. Somewhere along the way, she had lost herself. I had been so wrapped up in my own success, in my career, that I hadn't noticed the cracks forming in our relationship. I hadn't noticed that she was slipping away, drowning in her own feelings of loneliness and isolation. "I was trying to get something back that I lost," Catherine said, her voice trembling. "I felt invisible. I felt like I was giving everything to you, to Sophie, and I had nothing left for myself. I started seeing Ryan because he made me feel seen again. He made me feel alive." Her confession pierced me deeper than anything else. It wasn't just an affair. It was a cry for help, a desperate attempt to find validation in someone else, something I had failed to provide her. The realization made me sick, and yet I couldn't deny it. She had fallen out of love with me, not because of Ryan, but because of everything I had failed to notice. "I didn't want to hurt you, Victor," she whispered. "I never meant for it to go this far. I'm so sorry. I know I've ruined everything. I don't expect you to forgive me." Her words weren't enough. Apologies would never fix the damage she had done. But hearing her speak the truth, hearing her admit the depth of her pain, made me understand just how much she had been hiding. She wasn't just looking for someone else. She was running from something inside herself, and she had pulled me down with her. I stood up, pacing across the room, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The betrayal was one thing. The loss of trust, the broken vows, all of that was another. But what hurt the most was the loss of the person I thought I knew so well. The woman who had promised to love me, for better or worse, had walked away from me in the most devastating way possible. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Catherine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if this can be fixed. You've shattered everything." She nodded, her face crumpling in defeat. "I understand," she replied, the tears falling freely now. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know that I'm truly sorry for what I did. I never wanted to destroy you, to destroy us. I didn't know how else to cope." I walked out of the room, the pain of her words still cutting through me. I needed space. I needed time to think. I had no idea what the future held. But one thing was clear. I couldn't go on pretending that everything was fine. This marriage had been built on lies, and it was time to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. The following days were a blur of confusion, pain, and endless conversations. Every time I looked at Catherine, the woman I had spent nearly 2 decades with, I saw the betrayal etched into her face. Her tears, her apologies, none of it mattered anymore. It wasn't about the affair anymore. It wasn't about the lies or the way she had systematically pulled away from me. It was about the deep, irreplaceable breach of trust. It was about the fact that I didn't know who she was anymore. And worse, I didn't know who I had become in this marriage. I spent hours alone, walking around the house, sitting in my office, staring at the walls. My mind raced with 1,000 different thoughts. What was I supposed to do now? Was it even possible to fix this? Could I look at Catherine again without feeling the raw sting of her betrayal? I had never imagined a life without her. We had always been a team, sure. There were the ups and downs, but we had always worked through them, or so I thought. This wasn't something you could just forgive and forget. Could I even trust her again? Could I forgive her? Catherine had given me her apologies, her regret. But it wasn't enough. I needed to know what was real. And in the end, it didn't matter how much she regretted it. The damage had been done, and I couldn't undo it. I had tried to bury my feelings of resentment, to offer her the comfort and understanding she begged for. But the truth was, I couldn't look past the hurt. I couldn't look past the way she had lied to me for so long, the way she had built a life with Ryan behind my back, all while pretending that everything was fine. I took a step back and started considering what was best for me and for Sophie. I had a daughter to think about now. I couldn't afford to let this betrayal consume me entirely. She deserved better than to live in a house filled with the ghost of her parents' broken relationship. No child should have to witness the constant tension between two people who were no longer a team, who no longer respected each other the way they should. The hardest part of it all was the decision to let go. As much as I loved Catherine, I knew I couldn't continue to live in this toxic, broken marriage. It wasn't healthy for me, and it wasn't healthy for Sophie. Catherine had already made her choices. She had chosen Ryan, her affair, her escape. I had to choose me. I had to choose to protect my mental and emotional well-being, even if it meant walking away from the woman I had loved for so long. When I told her that I wanted a divorce, I saw the panic in her eyes. Her face fell as though she had never expected me to actually go through with it. But there was no other choice. "Victor, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "We can fix this. I want to fix this. I'll do anything. Please don't leave." But I couldn't listen to the words anymore. I had heard them too many times before. This wasn't about promises or apologies anymore. It was about me reclaiming my life, my peace of mind, and my sense of self-respect. I wasn't asking for perfection, but I couldn't continue living in a relationship built on lies. I looked at her one last time and said quietly, "I can't do this anymore. You've made your choice. Now, I'm making mine." The next few weeks were painful as we moved through the divorce process. I focused on keeping things civil for Sophie's sake, but every moment with Catherine felt like walking through fire. It wasn't easy. It wasn't clean, but I knew I was doing the right thing. Slowly, I started to breathe again. I started to rebuild my life, one piece at a time. I started going to therapy, processing the hurt, and learning how to trust myself again. Sophie and I grew closer as I dedicated more time to being a better father to her. She had always been my priority, but now, with the burden of my failed marriage lifted, I could finally focus on the joy of being her dad. Without the constant undercurrent of resentment and sadness that had filled our home, Catherine's absence, while painful, opened up space for me to reconnect with myself. Eventually, the pain of the betrayal didn't feel as sharp. I realized that while Catherine's actions had crushed me, they didn't define me. I had control over my future, and I could choose the direction I wanted to go in. As for Catherine, she eventually moved out, and we settled into our new, separate lives. She continued her relationship with Ryan, and I focused on moving forward, letting go of the past and the person she had once been to me. One evening, after the divorce was finalized, I sat in the living room, the quiet hum of the house, almost comforting in its stillness. I realized that despite everything, I was okay. I was stronger than I had given myself credit for. I was healing, slowly but surely. And in that moment, I knew that I would be all right. I had survived this, and I would continue to move forward, not just for myself, but for Sophie too. The betrayal, the heartbreak, it was all part of the story now. But it didn't define who I was. It only showed me the strength I had within to let go, to move on, and to finally find peace again.